PokerStatic.com. We bring you the interviews you want to hear. Now with your hosts, Bret Oliverio and Eric Bickel, the Poker Static Hot Seat.
What's up? Welcome to the Poker Static Hot Seat. Bret Oliverio with Eric Bickel, and tonight's guest, his name is Bryce Paradis. You know him as Freedom25, and of course, just from checking out his bio, what jumps out at me is $2.5 million in online winnings in 2007, which is just freaking mind-blowing. So, Bryce, thanks for coming on the show. We appreciate it.
Happy to be here.
So tell us a little bit about your story, Bryce. Here's what I know going into this, is that you, I know you from Stocks Poker. I know that you're a limit hold'em king. I know that eventually you know, the Stocks group was bought out by Card Runners, and then it went away with the whole scandal and everything. And I know that somewhere in between there was a retirement, but then there's a resurgence. I know that you're a businessman. An entrepreneur. How old are you? Let's start with that.
I'm 26.
26. And I know that you're big into, like, owning properties now. You got a lot of side businesses that you go into. How many properties do you own now, or have you owned?
So the idea is that when I was playing poker, I bought into an apartment building out in Windsor, Ontario, which is kind of the Canadian side of Detroit. And that's got about 29 units in it. It's by the university down there. I also bought up a bunch of mortgages, so I was backing kind of angel investment mortgages on some Canadian properties, mostly around the place I live in Edmonton, Alberta. And in addition to that, I got into some property development stuff where the idea was to develop a bunch of different subdivisions around. There was a big push to get a whole bunch of upgraders, oil upgraders built in sort of industrial Alberta here, which is kind of the oil sands capital of Canada, where we have a lot of oil industry going on. And this was all done, I kind of got all my money invested about, I would say September 2008, which if you're setting up a portfolio is not a good timeline to be in, because you know within 3 months all that fell out. There was $300 million in industrial projects that were set up to go in that area. Everything got gutted. Windsor unemployment went up to 20%. And with a lot of these mortgages, we're in the lawyers and we're chasing everybody around now, doing foreclosures, trying to hack out deals. And it's not fun, because when you're doing a business where you have two winners, it's very easy to work with people. But when somebody's going to lose, then everybody's fighting tooth and nail. And I've never had any big experience with the legal system before this, and it's gross. I've got to say, it's just absolutely disgusting. Just what a big, squishy, soft, like intangible mess it is. And frankly, it drives me on tilt. It makes me do it.
Now, was the idea here with the investments, you basically, cashed out all your poker earnings and sort of put, like, would you say you put 100% of your money into these investments, maybe half of it?
Very close. Obviously, I've kept a little bit to myself, but there was a period this summer that came up where I was expecting to cash out of something. It was my understanding from my broker that I'd be getting paid out of a project. And I put myself in this situation where I put basically the last bit of everything I had into a new project, expected to cash out of this thing. It didn't go through. And so for the last few months, I've been selling like little things, little holdings in, like little 20,000 projects here and there, getting out of those and putting together some cash, playing some poker to get by. But at this point, basically everything is in real estate. And it's funny because there's two funny things about it. First of all, that was the stuff that was supposed to set me free. Now it's what's got me trapped. I'm tied up with a million different things here. The second thing that's funny about it is that, like, I just did a Facebook posting that I'm looking forward to getting, out of dealing with all like the slime balls, hustlers, and degenerates in business, and getting back to the honest world of poker. Like, that's how I feel about it at this point. It has been so incredibly disappointing and so frustrating to deal with the business side of things, the legal system in particular, and just the quality of people involved is not what I would expect from sort of the semi-elite people. You're dealing with the branch managers of banks. You're dealing with higher-end investment people. You're dealing with businessmen who've been entrepreneurs for 40 years, and you are running multi-million-dollar investment corporations, and they're just not really impressive people. So that's been kind of disappointing. So the other thing that's kind of funny is I remember very specifically when I was doing the investment building. I've been doing poker for about 3 years, and I'm buying up the place in Windsor, Ontario. A very good friend of mine, I knew his parents very well, and they said at the time, it's a good thing that he's getting into some legitimate business, and at this point, I wish I never had. So I wish I'd stuck with disreputable poker.
Well,
so,
let's
you live and learn, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get into, and you're learning so much at such a young age, it's unbelievable. Let's get into the poker story. I'm guessing it started the way that a lot of these guys did. Was it around the Moneymaker era, or was it before that? And when did you jump into the online world?
It was about that time.
Yeah.
I came into it about 2005. For me, I was one of the guys. I'm trying to remember. There was one guy who did very well. He got second at the World Series of Poker one time. But I was one of the Magic the Gathering guys who'd been playing card games all his life and strategy games. And I was at the time working at a machining shop, just running a punch press and like a drilling rig. And this miserable job that I was just paying the rent for. And I could have paid the rent of my place working at McDonald's or something like that. So when poker came up, I started playing kind of for fun, and then I put $50 in and ran it up. And eventually I started making more money playing poker than I did going to my day job, and didn't like the day job at all. So there wasn't really much risk of walking away at that point. So I decided to go for it, and it got out of hand. And it was lucky, right? Because you can't just get into it like that anymore. There was a very small window of maybe about 5 or 10 years where, maybe not even 10 years, maybe 5 or 6 years, we could really just get into online poker. And if you could not tilt and read books and kind of pay attention, you could make some money at least.
Right.
Back in the party poker era and things like that. And it's definitely a different game today.
For sure. But what I also find interesting about your story, too, is, you're a limit king, right? I mean, that's what I know you as. I mean, you kill the limit games, and it doesn't seem to be nearly as popular, although the mixed games are obviously gaining in popularity now. But, I mean, to be primarily a limit player, how did you make that choice? A lot of people start in limit, and then they move on to no limit, but you seem to have stayed there and made quite a killing there. Why is that? And then my follow-up to that is the limit game still sort of a profitable game for new players, or no?
Right. Well, so the thing with that is it used to be that limit was the game to play. 10 years ago there wasn't online no limit, or even 8 years ago there wasn't online no limit. So by the time I rolled around, it was still in that transition thing where the money to be made was still in limit hold'em. That's where the big games were. That's where the higher volume of play was. And just around the time I started playing, maybe a year after, in about 2006, that's when a lot of people started moving to no-limit play, because it was getting very popular, because that's all the tournament play and stuff like that. But that was actually a transition. It used to be that limit was king. And so most people who started playing, before 2005, 2006, all started playing limit hold'em. It would have been very rare to find a professional no-limit hold'em player at the time who wasn't a live player or a tourney player or something like that. So that's what we were all kind of brought up on, and people like, say, Kyle Hendon or Nick Stockstrader or other people around the time, they all made that transition. Brian Townsend started as a limit hold'em player, and they all transitioned over to no-limit play. So most people who have been around a bit longer either did make that transition or didn't. The reason I didn't was because at the time, it's what I was comfortable with. I wasn't necessarily seeking like a very long-term career in poker. I've never had that confidence that poker will be there for me, in 2 years from now at any given point. So because of that, I just sort of stuck with what I was doing. Plus, in 2007 especially, with limit hold'em really getting out of hand for myself, and with party poker crumbling after the legislation in the U.S., and all the action moving to full tilt and stars, and suddenly being able to play a lot of heads-up games, that was sort of a new game at the time, as nobody had really played a whole ton of heads-up limit hold'em. So it was this great new thing where you could get ahead of the curve, and as long as you stayed ahead of it, there was tons of soft money coming in, and it was just a real gold rush at the time, really. There was a lot of people who made a killing off of heads-up limit hold'em in the, maybe about the first year or two after party poker didn't collapse but lost all their market share after they pulled out of the U.S. And today it's very different. Today it is extremely difficult to make a living playing heads-up limit hold'em, especially if you're in the U.S. If you're if you're an American and you're trying to make money playing just heads-up limit hold'em, I don't really even see how it's possible. You could maybe pay your rent doing it, but it's so hard to get action, right? Because, and this makes sense, right? Because the opportunity cost to just sit down and wait for a fish to come to your table is so low that everybody can do it. As long as you can practice game selection, you can have a list of 20 tables. There's no risk. Whereas at a six-mac table or a ring table, if you want to go after the fish, you still have to deal with the tougher players who are there as well. So that's kind of why these six-max games have survived a bit better and heads-up died off. But it was kind of shocking for me because last year I was playing a bit and the games were still kind of good, and this year they're just completely abysmal. So in my mind, there kind of is no more heads-up limit hold'em, except for something you can run on the side. Like if I'm playing six-max, I'll keep heads-up tables open, and that's fine. but it would be a hard thing to be a full-time professional at. I have some students who are European players who make it work for them, but it's very hard. Six Max, on the other hand, is a much different game than it used to be, but there's still money to be made there. Unfortunately, nobody's going to do like Neverwin did, and you'll rack up $1 million at 100, 200 these days, but if you want to pay your bills or cash out $10K a month, I still think it's very doable. Difficult for new players, but I think that it's still something that's very achievable, especially if you're willing to log hands and have good discipline and study the game. The harder thing at this point is, at this point, most people have very good fundamentals. It used to be you would sit down at a 10-20 table, and people play the wrong hands. They don't really know what's going on. They don't understand basic concepts. They run stupid bluffs. At this point, everybody kind of gets it. That's probably kind of like the training site's fault a little bit. Well, more than a little bit, but just sort of the natural evolution of poker, because there's such a strong pull for people to, there's such a strong incentive for them to get better at the games. I would say that the skills that make a good poker player these days have to do with really understanding how the game works, being very technical, and also, I suppose, having a good understanding of how to exploit static players is something that's very important. And so for myself, coming back to the games recently, that's something that I've made a big focus, is understanding what my regular opponents do and taking advantage of the fact that they don't really adapt to my play that much.
Let me ask you about 2007, because basically what you said was you jumped in the heads-up limit hold'em games and absolutely crushed them. Right. What sort of made you so good at them? I mean, you were even playing players like, David Benjamin at the nosebleed games, who's been playing his entire life. What made you so good just jumping into heads-up play without struggling at all?
Right. Well, the thing about that is, it's not like I started and then I got good right away. For years, what I did before that, I was on a lot of prop programs where I would have to start tables on less popular sites, and I would get better rate back deals for that. And so because of that, I played a little bit of heads up. But the important thing to remember is that basically nobody had played this game. Like, even if you're somebody like David, who'd been playing live for many, many years or all his life, it's not like he played a lot of heads up limit hold'em. One, because you can't get a high volume in, and two, just because you can't just really sit down at a heads up limit hold'em table in a casino. They don't spread that. So you'd play once in a while, but not that much. So, as with many games, people's fundamentals were just bad. Like, there was a concept of what you would do in heads-up limit hold'em, but it was so far removed from what was actually good or close to sort of a equilibrium strategy that people just had huge leaks that you could exploit. And the game was relatively simple, because in hold'em, it's very easy to combo count and figure out, if you're willing to invest the time, how often your opponent has a pair on the flop, stuff like that. And because there isn't a lot of game space in heads-up limit hold'em, it's pretty easy to break it down, and once you understand certain board textures and things like that, you could really get ahead of it. At this point, the game has matured, and most people do have strong fundamentals now, but it used to be that people didn't even know how many hands to play. And so, the thing with David is that you could tell as you played him, he's a smart poker player. And at this point, my understanding is his play has improved quite a bit. But you can't fold 2/3 of your small blinds and win a heads-up limit hold'em. You just can't. You're giving away, 5 bets per 100 or something right there to a good player. So the extent of the leaks that people were making were just huge. But the thing with poker, like everything else, is that if you're making a mistake, it's because you don't know that you're making that mistake. It's the stuff that you don't know that kills you, and just nobody got it. And there was a lot of room for people who were willing to analyze the game to get in there and just get super far ahead of the curve. And people would just look at the stuff that they were doing because it was different and say, that's different than what we think is good, therefore it's bad. But the way it goes is that often they're right, but this case not.
When you were killing it, were we just consistently winning, almost day in and day out, or did you have huge swings where you'd win a ton one day, maybe lose it back the next day? I mean, how did it work for you?
Well, it could be swingy. I definitely had a pretty good run. For the higher stakes games, the thing that was most fortunate for me is that I got a run of really good action, where I could sit down and play 3 or 4 days a week. And some of the opponents I would be playing against, I would probably have a smaller edge. Like if I was playing against Patrick Antonius, I probably had a very small edge. But there were a lot of people I could sit down and play against for a massive edge. And so I did have swings, but I wasn't in the red that often, to be honest. I maybe at some points was down 200 bets, but that was the extent of it. And I was winning for a 4.5 big bet 100 edge there for the entire year. And that wasn't uncommon. There were other people like, Sally Wu, or I'm trying to think of his name. I know his real name, but I shouldn't say that. Fatal Fog had a win rate for that for a long time. So many players who were able to get ahead of the curve were just crushing it for 3 or 4 bets per 100. And you don't lose too much when you're winning like that. Big bets per 100, not even blinds. So it's like beating no limit for 9 blinds per 100.
Are those guys, are they still around and still killing it, or did they fade off too?
A lot of them have faded off. I'm not necessarily close with any of them. I've been in touch with various high-stakes players these days, like, say, Hasu Fly and stuff like that. But it's so hard to get action now, right? So most people are not just doing heads up. Most people have either moved on or they're doing 6-max. Sometimes I see Fatal Flog at my 6-max tables. Mike Schneider's around doing 6-max. So many of the old, good limit hold'em players are still around, but most of them have migrated to 6-max, are spreading heads up on the side, or do live play if they're in an area where they can do that.
What about full ring? Nobody plays full ring limit hold'em?
Well, people play full ring, but they tend to play more 6-max. Full ring tends to draw in, I think, more fish. If you sit down at old 1530 full ring table, you'll probably find more fish out at a 6-max table just because that's what casinos spread.
Good.
So
good, right?
Yeah.
That's what we're looking for.
Right. So I play the full ring games myself, but there just tends to be a bit less of them.
Right.
Most people do play 6-max.
Right. So if a new player came to you and said, "Hey, I'm struggling with no limit hold'em. Everybody's really good at it. Maybe I should try limit hold'em." What would you say to them?
I don't know if limit hold'em's the place to be for a new player right now. I think it depends on what your goals are. If you want to make $5,000-$10,000 a month grinding, limit hold'em and scooping up your rake back, a lot of people make good money doing Supernova Elite stuff on Stars. If you want to do that, there's lots of good money in that. And there are plenty of people who beat that for 0 bets per 100, have insane swings, but at the end of the year they cash out their 60% rake back and they make very good money. So if that's your goal, to just kind of grind 3, 6, 5, 10, no problem. If you want to get into 10, 20, 15, 30, it's pretty doable. The 30, 60 games these days are hard. The 300, 600 games used to be easier, to be honest. Like, there is a big difference.
Right.
Even the 10, 20 games today are harder than some of the 100, 200 games used to be 3 years ago.
How hard is it to teach a new player to limit hold'em to break even at mid stakes?
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. I do actually have some students who play 3, 6, 5, 10. I do coach a couple of the guys who do the mass multi-tabling thing at Stars.
Right.
I think it depends on a lot of things. To get a person to the point where they can be, 1-2 or something, or 2-4 is not really a problem. And even 5-10. The biggest thing is you do have to have a really good sense of what is considered standard poker play at this point, because you have to be able to deal with that and anticipate it. So it's not even just a matter of understanding how the game works, but also going out, watching videos, getting in the forums, and understanding what you can expect people to do, and be able to deal with that very common style of play and understand what is kind of considered the normal response to any given action. Because that's really what you have to deal with a lot, is you have to deal with a lot of grinders and be able to take a little bit of money from them and then just beat up on the fish. And at a 3-6 game, there's going to be tons of huge fish, a lot of mediocre regulars. As you move up, it weeds out. You get lots of mediocre regulars and maybe one fish at the table. And that's kind of how it goes. But it's not so much that you can just look at a hand chart and win anymore. You have to actually understand how the game works.
Are there personality types that lend themselves more to limit players versus no limit players? Have you noticed that?
That's actually a good question. It's not like I coach some people for heads up no limit. I don't think that there's a huge difference. I know one thing. No, I'm not going to say that there's probably a huge difference overall. I think it's just some people do gravitate to one game or the other, but it's more based on circumstances than personality.
Gotcha.
That's my impression, anyways.
Now, moving forward to your retirement, and I know you've been asked about it 1,000 times, but basically, you're printing money online and millions of dollars of it at that, and you decide to retire, and it's not because of a downswing. It's not because the games are getting too tough for you to beat. It's just you decided to just quit playing. Sort of talk about your mentality and what were the exact reasons on why you decided to do that.
So it's been interesting. So the way business has gone lately, I've had a lot of time to reflect on that decision and think about it. And at the time, there's two things to understand. At the time, I wasn't a great 6-max player. I was a pretty good 6-max player, so I could beat softer games. I would play the big games, but only if there was a fish in them. And one of the things that's really worked in my favor is that in coaching for the last 2 years, I've become what I consider to be a very good 6-max player. Now I can do well in the games today, even though they're much tougher. If I had just gone from the way I played 6-max 2 years ago to the way it is today, I would have trouble with that transition because those games today are as hard as the hardest games were then. But it's not like I could sit down with, say, Matt Horlenko and, some other, like, great six-max player and, try to eke out an edge. I'll sit down if there's a fish in the game at, 500, 1,000 or something like that, but it wasn't just going over whoever's action. So at the time, I was making my money by killing heads-up limit hold'em, and I'd gotten to the point where most people weren't playing me. So financially, that was a bit of a decision. 2, I'd run fairly good. It's not like I had a huge heater, but I ran pretty good, and that feels really nice when you're running 1,000, 2,000. And it doesn't have to stay that way. I'm not sure I can get a high volume of hands in. And so from the financial side of things, there was a bit of a decision that, okay, well, if I walk away now, I lock in the win. And my feeling at the time, being a bit younger and having never really seen like a financial collapse or anything like that, is you take your $3 million, you pay the tax on it, you invest it, money comes out, and I would have tons and tons of time to either work on doing something new or I could build up a real estate business and go on that. So I thought that, maybe I can't make it go forever off that much money, but I would have so much time that I could build something new. And recently I felt I was moving that direction before all this business stuff sort of came up. I had all this kind of bad news I was kind of alluding to earlier came up in about June, July of this year. And I've had some other things going on. I was looking to do some English lit stuff at the university. I nearly did a novel now. I've been sending short stories out to magazines. So that's something that I feel really passionate about and would be something that I would like to do. But unfortunately, I'm getting kind of pulled back into the business side of it. The other thing that happened at the time, which was actually a huge, huge thing, and which I kind of recognized at the time but didn't really understand, was that my identity for most of my adult life was that I could provide for myself, and I was good at doing that. So when I was a lot younger, I was delivering pizza. At a young age, I moved out when I was 17. I was the guy, out of all my friends who, would actually pay his rent on time, could lend money if I could because I wasn't always broke and stuff like that. Then I did a job at a machining shop trying to save money for school, did that, never went because I wasn't too interested. And then I started doing poker, kind of just because, it seemed like a good option at the time. I was sick of the machining thing. And this went on and on and on, and I never thought I would make millions of dollars playing poker. Even, like, the year before, I never thought I would make millions of dollars. I was thrilled thinking about, wow, I might make $200K this year. That's insane. And then I have this year where I run up, $2.5 million, and in the middle of that, I sort of know that, if I have a day where I win, like $150K or something like that, it's not money in the bank. It's part of my business, and that could go away. So every day I'm running up a win and thinking, okay, don't get attached to it. This could go away. And then, over the course of these weeks in October 2007 especially, I run up all these huge wins, and then I'm up to, 2.8 million on the year, I think, at peak or something like that. I finished at like 2.65. And I thought to myself, well, holy shit, it actually happened. I actually made all this money, and the whole way I wasn't really expecting it to work out like that. Maybe it will, maybe it won't, but it's not like I was really willing to invest myself in that because I knew that was a big liability. And then I get there, and I had a huge crash because that just completely dissolved my identity as someone who could take care of himself and provide for himself because all the money I made going forward didn't matter at all. And I liked poker well enough, but I was beating myself up to do it. I was staying up all night. I was chasing sessions. I was canceling appointments. The same year I did all these stuff with Stocks Poker. We started that up. I did all the stuff with the building out in Windsor. And so I was just going nonstop. And I hit this wall where making more money doesn't improve my quality of life. And the whole time nothing's changed. I've just been sitting, in my house doing my thing. Like, I'm not doing new things. I'm just cranking out more money so that I can provide for myself. But suddenly it just doesn't matter anymore. So it was a really big existential crisis. And I didn't just, okay, I quit. I took 3 weeks, and I spent my time doing other things, trying to look at different stuff. And I've done this several times, thinking that if I can think of something else that I want to do rather than play poker, I'll do it. And at the end of the 3 weeks, I thought, okay, well, I still don't feel like playing poker. I'm going to walk away. So I started cashing my money out and looking at doing other things. And in some ways, it was a good decision. With my understanding of myself now and some other things, what I would have done at this point would have been different in the sense that I would have taken more time and had more patience for myself, but it was a really big crash at the time because I so overinvested myself in making that money that there wasn't too much left over when making money didn't matter anymore.
Was it one of those things where, you made so much money so quickly, you figured, okay, well, this is over, I made millions here, I'm going to cash this out, and I'm going to run it up in real estate, everyone else is making millions, before I know it, I'll have 20 million.
Oh, yeah, I definitely had some thoughts like that, but it's sort of, there's two sides of it. One, I thought that, yeah, maybe I can do that, And two, I thought that even if it doesn't work out, I'm going to have all the time in the world to figure out something different. So in my mind, the way it works is I dump the money into real estate. Either it goes well and I run the money up, or it doesn't go so well and it trickles down and maybe it only lasts 10 years or something like that. Never did it occur to me that I could be put in a position where in 3 years I would get to a point where suddenly I'm worried about bankruptcy. And not because I've gambled it away, not because I've gotten into stupid debts, but because I've had a couple business deals go sour, I have a bit of money outstanding, and I don't know where my money's coming from, and my health crashes at the same time. So that was very scary, and it just wasn't within my perceived range of the way that things would work. You think things go up 20%, you think things go down 20%. You don't think that, okay, I'm going to dump this money into this company and then have it collapse, or that the real estate market's going to come down 30% in these areas, or that rents are going to come down 20%. Growing up from 84 was when I was born to present, things were always getting better. So I remember in a textbook sense things like the Great Depression, all the different recessions, the 80s stock crash, things like that, but they seemed like things that used to happen. They didn't seem like things that would keep happening. And it was boom time, and I thought that things would keep going well, and I also thought that if things went poorly, I could always come back to poker and knock out an easy $20K a month. As it turns out, maybe. We'll see about that. But it was a shock to come back to poker as well and see just how tough it had gotten, even since 6 months or a year before the last time I played a lot.
Well, what exactly is the process from? I mean, how do you go from investing millions of dollars to almost on the verge of bankruptcy? I mean, did it happen all at once? How exactly did they get all your money and leave you with nothing?
Right.
I mean.
Well, so the idea was I was throwing money into these mortgages, and they were a cash flow thing because everybody's going to pay out a little bit every month. And if one of them, I had 4 of these things going, and when the recession kicked up, all of them went under. A lot of them were bridge loans, and then the financing standards changed a lot. A lot of people lost their income. So with those, 3 of the 4 mortgages, going through the foreclosure thing, we ended up getting basically a lot of money out. We've got one of them we're going to get crushed on. The problem was that there was no cash coming in. So rather than having a cash flow that was paying my bills every month, I was in a situation where I was eating up a chunk of cash, and I was expecting a new chunk of cash to come in, and then it didn't come through. And I thought I had other stuff that I could basically sell right away, that I talked to people and said, yeah, if you need to dump this at 70 cents on the dollar, no problem. That turned out not to be true. So I had some people who didn't necessarily lie to me, but sort of misadvised me on things like that. And that's been one of the problems I noted that I've had doing with business, is that when people tell me something about the way something worked, is that I lock that in as like a poker problem or like a math problem. Like, okay, well, if I can do this, then I can do this, then I can do this. But there's this big fuzzy spot where a lot of times things don't work out. It's not like poker where there's rules. There's a lot of room for human error, stupidity, and ignorance as well. So there was that. There was also one thing I got into was that Windsor building. And when I got into it, for the first very little while, it did okay. Then what happened is after rents crashed, it went from being an asset to a liability. So I'm trying to sell the thing right now, but what it ended up being is, rather than being something that was giving me cash every month, it's something that's taking cash every month right now. And with the expenses really battened down, what's happened is that some of that cash is actually going to my pocket because it's going to the mortgage and the principal payment, but I still have to pay it every month to avoid the foreclosure on the thing. So if I just had to pay my bills, no problem. It's not like I'm going bankrupt because I can't pay my rent and food bills, or that I have huge business expenses or loans or things like that. It's because I've had a lot of things turn sour on me. I have those development deals where they're on a sort of a pay-as-you-go process. And the idea was that one of those would be done 2 years ago, and then I could take that in. If I was short on cash, I could refinance against it, things like that, and it didn't work out. They lied about the contract, and I've looked in there since then, but it doesn't work exactly the way that they were telling us, and now they're taking advantage of that, sort of taking it on their investors, which is shame on me, but also shame on them. So a lot of things like that. It's not like I went and leveraged my business to hell. Just things that were supposed to be making money started costing money, and here we are.
All right, let's get a timeline so we could put all this together. All right, so you have that sort of feeling like, okay, I want to try some other things. That's in sometime there in 2007. You get involved in a lot of these business relationships. Does any of this coincide with sort of the collapse of stocks poker? And then when did you make your return to poker? So those are two really, really big questions.
Right.
And then I know at some point there you had a health crisis, which I think was flat out depression. So that had to have been tied into all of that.
Stuff,
Yeah.
Yeah, so, here's the timeline then. I guess in 2007, I did the apartment building. We closed it late in the year. That's when I got possession of that. Then in early 2008, I did a couple small mortgages. One of them was only for like $60,000. Then I did another one. And then throughout the year, I did a couple more of those. I think the last one was probably late that year. Then, with the investing side of the property development things, I did that in stages from early summer 2008 through the fall. And I overinvested in that, to be sure. One of the problems with this is I was very under-diversified. And my feeling was that real estate is real estate. Yeah, as many people felt at the time. Maybe it goes up or it goes down, but it doesn't crash like the stock market does. Guess what? It does. That's not how I felt about it at the time. And in my mind, I was thinking about the things as if they were much more liquid than they were. My thought process was, if I need to sell one of these mortgages at 80 cents on the dollar to raise cash, no problem. Or if I buy into this property development thing and the land appreciates in the meantime, no problem. I take a loss and I walk away. But that's not how it's working, obviously. In any case, so 2008, everything's basically invested. And we are working on stocks poker. I was putting tons and tons of time into that. Thought it would be a lot more profitable than it was. It does okay, but I didn't have a huge stake in it. And those sites also really plateaued in 2008. They had a huge boom, and then basically they all flatlined after they sort of saturated the market. And we always thought we would be able to go after the casual poker market. Like we went down to Vegas and we gave out flyers and sort of free passes for a day and things like that. And everybody seemed interested in it. And then what we all found out, kind of separately, like us, Card Runners, Deuces Cracked, Daniel Negreanu's new site at the time, which we thought would be huge. As it turned out, casual poker players think it's a neat idea, but they don't want to spend an hour or 2 hours a day watching poker videos. They've got other stuff to do. They're just playing for fun. So that was a huge part of the market that we thought we'd be able to tap, but we never did. So that was 2008. 2009, I didn't really do anything business-wise. It was becoming apparent that there were some problems with a lot of the projects, but the development company was being very misleading about what was going on with the state of the company. They were saying, okay, this project will be done this year. They were doing some shady accounting where it looked like they were much more solvent than they were. They were nearly bankrupt at the time themselves. They overextended themselves. And then with the mortgages, what happened is with one guy, we knew we were doing a foreclosure. And then with one of the other ones, the biggest one, which I'm taking a huge hit on, we decided with them to cut them that break on their mortgage. We cut their payments down a little bit and said, okay, well, look, we're going to run the interest on this, but if you want to pay a little bit less every month, that's fine. And they said, no problem, we'll be able to keep up with this. And that sort of drug out for a while, and then this year we ended up having to do a foreclosure on that as well. And so what happened is, business-wise, 2009, not much. And then in late 2009, I started really getting into literary stuff, which is something I've always been interested in, but not really committed too much. And along the way, I've been playing poker intermittently. I've been playing Heads Up No Limit. I've been playing Pot Limit Omaha. I've been playing Limit Hold'em. And I think in the whole period between when I sort of announced retirement in 2007 and present, I made a little bit shy of 400K or something like that. So the whole time this is going on, I was just sitting down. I was like, I want to play 100, 200 today. Okay, I play. Games are soft go. And then earlier in 2010, the games really started to die off. And I basically pulled the last of everything I had out of poker, thinking that, okay, well, this looks like it's basically done. And what happened then is in May, I got a couple unexpected cash calls from the property development company because I thought they weren't supposed to be asking me for this last money until the things were done. And so that set off sort of this big process of exploring the rest of my business and finding out that all the stuff that I'd been told was going okay was not going so well. So I go and hit my broker and say, okay, well, look, I need to dump one of these mortgages. Let's take it to the market. Nobody actually wants to buy it anymore. I go and look at refinancing some things. Well, I can't borrow against this. I can't borrow against that anymore. It used to be you could, but now there's new lending regulations. Can't do that. So that's a problem. And then going through different things, the foreclosure process, we got strung around a little bit with people's lawyers. And it just went from a situation where I thought that I'm going to have this chunk of cash and I can carry everything into the end zone and things will be okay to, okay, well, now I'm going to have to chase all these guys for this foreclosure stuff, which probably shouldn't be too surprising. In addition to that, the company that I've been doing all this financial stuff with is basically been completely crooked, very dishonest, very misleading, and they're borderline insolvent. And having to deal with that all of a sudden, and then just in addition to that, my cat died in the middle of all that, which was very disappointing.
Oh my God!
The thing with the Windsor building, and so what happened is that when this all came up, in May and June, I thought, it was just a couple of things at first. Like, I had to raise some capital to pay these guys off, and then I thought, okay, well, I'll do this, I'll figure it out, and then it's done. And so at first I thought, like, those 3 months before that were some of the best months of my life. I got into a great relationship. I was feeling really comfortable with myself. I was working on all this literary stuff that I had a real passion for. I was taking time to do things like drawing classes, getting tons of exercise, playing sports with my friends, and just 16 hours a day, awesome, every day, and just so relaxed and so just like letting go and letting things kind of happen naturally, because I felt that everything's set up, I don't need to worry, and within kind of the non-financial sphere, I was very open to just sort of exploring, see what happens, and not stress about it too much because I felt like I had time. So this thing comes up in June, and then I start, kind of revving up again. I start talking to the bankers, and then by mid-June, I'm just completely wired because I haven't closed this deal yet. Just like pushing as hard as possible, thinking that, okay, well, given all the time it took to get this money, and that I'm probably not going to have this opportunity again, it makes sense, rationally, to just go after this, like 110% every day. So, I'm getting up, going for 18 hours a day, crashing in bed, and I'm feeling good, right, because I'm on this high. I'm just going 110%, and wow, look at me, look at me go. I'm doing poker, I'm doing writing, I'm doing all the business side of things, I'm keeping up with, all the social side of everything I said before, and just nonstop. And at the end of the day, you look back and like, wow, I did all that in a day, that's awesome. And doing that every day. And then around the time, where my cat died, and it became apparent that things weren't going to be finished at the end of the month, I don't know, it started to get ugly, right, where suddenly I'm starting to feel burnt out, I'm starting to feel, not so happy about it, but I think that, well, whatever, I'm going to push through, I'm going to get it done, and I'm just going to make it happen, and I'm not feeling the ability to relax. I don't want to relax, I want to keep going, I want to be this guy who can, get this stuff done and give myself every opportunity to succeed, but at the same time, I set no ceiling on how much effort I was willing to put into it. In my mind, it was as much as possible, so I was trying to go infinite, right? So what happened one day is I'm out with my girlfriend at a bar for somebody's birthday party, and I'm having a bit of a headache, and I think, well, I'm feeling kind of sick. So I go home early, and the next day I'm feeling sick too. And it went on for, a couple of weeks that, I was feeling worse and worse. I'd never really been sick for that long before, and I thought, oh, this is a terrible time for this. I need to be doing all this different stuff. I need to be bringing in cash from poker so that I can keep up with the bills. I have a few months leeway, but not too much. Like, I really need to get this going now. I hadn't been in the games for that long, so I wasn't, necessarily super comfortable with what was going on. Didn't really have a good idea of, where the places to play were. I was still trying to do a lot of heads up. And it was weird because normally if I'm sick, I can play poker. Like, if I have a physical illness, it wasn't a problem. And I'd burnt out a lot before, but it didn't seem like that. And I kept going through this cycle where I thought, okay, well, if I'm feeling really bad, I'll take a couple days off, and then I'll come back, and then I would play, and I would crash, and I would just, I wouldn't be able to focus at all, and it was really bad. And I thought to myself, well, this isn't cool because I can't do anything. Like, my whole identity was wrapped up in the ability to just go and do it, right? And especially the mental side of things, because I thought that would never go away. And over the course of a month, it got progressively worse. And for one, I didn't know exactly what was going on. For two, like, I went and I got checked out for, I was diagnosed with, anxiety attacks. I was diagnosed with an ulcer. I was diagnosed with anemia. Eventually, after a really bad week, I've had some people in my family deal with depression. We decided to go and see a psychologist and psychiatrist, and we started doing medication. We started working on that. But it's, to be honest, it's the most frightening experience of my life. I've been around people who've dealt with depression, and I thought that having depression or an episode like this would be like you're having a really, really, really bad day all the time. It's not like that. I couldn't even focus on TV. I couldn't think. There were times where I was losing track of where I was physically because I was so kind of obsessive-compulsively thinking. And if I had to say what it was for me in terms of dealing with that, it's with the inability to accept what's going on right now, and you get so tied up in either the future or the past that it's almost like you're blocking out your sensory perceptions. It's like all your computing power is tied up with just repetitive predictions and just cycling like that. And it was just terrifying. And it was, I would get up. I remember there was one day where I was trying to get up and force myself to play poker, thinking that this is stupid. I'm going to willpower my way through it because as long as I have the willpower, I can get it done. And at the end of the day, I couldn't help myself. I was just screaming. I couldn't just deal with it, and I gave up. And then I thought, okay, well, if I can't play poker, if I just physically can't do this, I don't know what I'm going to do with myself, but yeah, at least I can write. And then I did that for a while, and same thing happened, and I just gave up. And for 2 months, it was really, really, really bad, and it was a terrifying experience because I did not know that I would get better. With an arm or something, if you break it, you can see healing, you sort of understand that, but with everything else, the one thing I thought would never leave me is that in going through all the experiences I have in the last couple of years, I thought that the ability to have a positive perspective on what's going on and being able to act with things in a constructive way would never leave me. The scary thing with that experience was that you change fundamentally. It's not like your perspective changes. It's not like your physical circumstances change. It's your personality changes, and it's not a choice. And that's scary to think that that can actually change on you, that can go away. So that's what that experience was like, and that's kind of been up to present. And then in the last couple of months, I made some small sales. I've been working on poker again, and just really focused on the mental side of it. And getting lots of rest is a huge part of that. That's something that's been very helpful for me.
Did you ever have any suicidal thoughts during your depression?
Philosophically, like, it's the sort of thing where you wonder where it's so intense, right? That not only do you just feel bad, like physically painful all the time, like when it was at its most intense, but anything that you predict, like, okay, what if things go this way, you have the same reaction to it, because it's the way that you think about, like, it shouldn't be that bad, like rationally this doesn't seem like it's that bad, but it feels awful. So there were times where, yeah, honestly, I did think that, wow, if it's this way all the time, like, how do you make a good life out of this? So at no point did I think about killing myself, but it was certainly a point of crisis where, like, you really wonder, where you always feel that, okay, well, you can make the best of anything, but if you can't even have a positive reaction to anything that's going on, like, how do you make that work? And that was very scary.
How did you get out of it? Did medicine ultimately be the big thing that kicked you over, get those levels in your brain right, or was it more therapy?
Both. So one of the things that I think was very fortunate for me was, on the one hand, I think the medication does help. I've talked to people who've dealt with depression before, which is a surprising amount of people, now that I'm actually talking about it. And some people have had positive experiences with medication, others haven't. The biggest thing for me is that in the last couple of years, I've done tons of reading. I've been really big into psychology, philosophy, and anything that ties into that. And I think that's given me some perspective. I'm not a religious person, but I consider myself a very spiritual person, or at least a very self-aware person. And going into this crisis with that perspective gave me a little bit of understanding of what was going on, not necessarily even in the sort of like chemical or physical sense, but more so in why it was a problem to not being able to deal with the present or accept that, and saying that things have to be this way and that this is not okay, and then trying to force it, gave me some perspective. And I've had to really, as the psychologist I've been going to says, it's kind of like learning how to walk, is that you learn how to, but if you injure yourself, you've got to retrain yourself to be able to deal with life on a day-to-day basis in a way that works for you. And it's been a process of just being able to sort of go with the flow and realize that I'll do what I can, and if I'm okay with what I'm doing, then whatever I'm doing is okay. And it's you can get really backwards in that, thinking that it's not about how I feel about it or how I react to it. It's about it is about how you react to it. It's not about how you think about it, though. So with the example of this money thing, is that I think it doesn't make sense to let it go. It doesn't make sense to not go 110%, but at what cost to yourself, right? And if you're willing to let go of that internal metric of what works for you and what actually feels good, you can kill yourself doing that. I believe that you could probably physically kill yourself just completely shutting out any sort of feedback from yourself for what actually works. Because that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. If it works for you, it does. And if it doesn't work for you, it doesn't. And the content is just the details. What matters is how you relate to it, not what's in it. So that's something that I've been working on, and it's been slow. At this point, I'm doing really well. For about 2 or 3 weeks, I've been doing really well. I don't really have any physical symptoms anymore. Used to have just tons of terrible stuff besides the headaches and the inability to focus. I would have burning in my back, my hands, cold, sweaty feet, and vomiting, stuff like that. But at this point, that subsided. And I don't know how all this stuff is going to turn out, to be honest. Hopefully it'll be okay, but I have a lot of things in my life that are going pretty well. Not too many of them are financial. But we'll see how it goes. And the biggest thing is, at this point, I'm going to commit to myself that no matter what comes up, I'm going to do what's okay for me and not do it because it makes sense or it's an abstraction or I should do things a particular way. So
here's the thing. I mean, it's no secret that poker is stressful, and I mean, just from hearing your story, poker sort of led to all your money, which led to the real estate, that whole losing it all. Why get back into poker? Why not just put it all aside?
Poker at this point to be really relaxing, to be honest. Poker is good training for life in the sense that when I play poker, poker is like life boiled down to the elements. Is you have limited information, you have you have plays that you can make that based on those your expectations of what's going on can be profitable or not. And there's some variance. And in the long run, if you keep plugging away, it tends to work out, but there's no guarantees. Life is exactly like that. So there was a point for me where playing poker because I was trying to. It was the sort of thing that at the end of every day, I wanted this to be done. I wanted it to be a year in the future, everything's paid off, and this is over. That was very unhealthy, and that would give me anxiety attacks playing poker that way. But when I got to the point where I could just sit down and just play poker, that was very good for me. And that was actually a very big, healthy part of sort of retraining myself to deal with my life in a constructive way. Because poker doesn't care about whether you want to win or lose, and it doesn't care about how upset you are or how things are going on. It just cares that you put in your best effort, and you may win or you may not. But all you can do is keep playing and hope it works out. And that's what my life is like right now. So there was actually a period in time where I would get anxious if I wasn't playing poker because I needed that. I need to have that experience again. And that was one of the beautiful things about poker in the first place, is that it taught me that, and I got a little bit of that, which was very valuable coming into this experience. And I was building on that and taking it even farther.
Can you tie up the loose ends on Stocks Poker? I know I talked to you a little before we went on the air about it, but we had Dusty on Leatherass, and he frankly signed he said he signed a confidentiality agreement. He wasn't permitted to talk about it. Can you kind of wrap up? I know following that sort of scandal at the time, which was kind of hard for me to comprehend a lot of that stuff, the allegations and the real edge maybe that Nick was gaining there. But I know that we interviewed people that they were clear and certain that there was an edge and that he was soft playing and all of that. I know that initially you came on and you defended him. I mean, he was your business partner, and I assume on some level you considered him a friend. And then I don't know where you sort of fell off there as it just crumbled so quickly for him. Can you tie that all together?
Right. At this point, looking at the stuff that came out, I've not gone through and really dug through the details because after a week of just being really riled up about that, I wanted to let it go. So I've kind of read over the synopses and stuff that's going on, but it looks like something was going on. I'm not going to say the extent of it, but he was up to something fishy. And the thing is, at the time, and this has been one of the things that's been upsetting about this entire experience for me, whether it be on the business side of things or the poker side of things, is that Nick was the sort of guy that I had a really deep trust with. Not because I'd known him all my life, but I had met him, and he had every part of a good guy vibe that I never met of a guy. He was honest. He was I met his family and his kids. He was a straight guy. He'd always treated everybody around him very fairly, very conservative, very concerned about people's well-being, and a very nice guy to deal with. And on top of that, there's the fact that Nick was loaded, and so it didn't really make much sense for him to go about, trying to eke out a little edge on, or maybe not a little edge financially, but some extra edge on poker to maybe make a few $100,000 a year doing this. From a business point of view, it didn't seem like it made that much sense. So when that came up, it just seemed to me like ferocious internet trolling. And if you go back and read the threads, obviously I get very indignant right away. And I thought that if something's going on here, we need to explore this. But, give this guy some respect. Go out and prove that he's doing something fishy and then tear apart his reputation. So I was really angry about that at the time, and I still kind of am. But like I said, sort of in the pre-interview show, welcome to the internet, and, what were we expecting? But, it was a huge, huge disappointment. And in the follow-up, I've sent an email to Nick saying that, look, I don't want an apology, but, just strictly for my curiosity's sake, what happened? Why do that? And what I got back wasn't really an explanation. It was just kind of a big story with many details. But there's more going on there than anybody knows. I don't know what it is. And personally, I just found the entire experience incredibly disappointing. I put thousands of hours into Stocks Poker. And not only was it something that I was kind of hoping would work out as a business, but the community on Stocks Poker is a little bit different than Card Runners, just because, how the blogs are set up and things like that. And so Card Runners is a great site. It's a fantastic poker resource. The community there is cool. But Stocks Poker, because it was kind of built by a very small group of guys. For myself, it was a lot more personal than that. And just the sort of people we had, in the forums and people I would talk about regularly after my blog. We wouldn't just have like a little comments box. We would go into the forums and we would write for pages about something that I had written about, something in philosophy that I thought was interesting. And, losing that, and then, that was in, I think, May or April, and then all this other stuff came up. At the time, it didn't really, I felt like I was over it. And of all the things that's happened, it's maybe one of the ones that rattles me the least, but it was definitely something in a string of things that it makes you wonder how anything really works. Kind of going through all this, and, you just kind of wonder, well, shit, what's the guy got to do? But, do what you can, and that's all you can do, so.
What's he up to right now? Do you have any idea? I mean, what exactly?
No idea. Besides that email, I haven't followed up with him. My understanding is that he's still playing poker. He's a bright guy. He has a great background in finance. He could definitely make money for himself there. He'll never be hurting for money. So, I don't know, really. I'd like to say I wish him all the best, but at the same time, I'm pretty angry, too.
What's the future for you now? I mean, obviously you have all of these business challenges, and hopefully they work out, and you're able to get out of there as best as you can. Poker-wise, though, it seems like you're really diving in pretty well, and you seem to be having some success, right? So that has to feel really good.
To be honest, it's a big comfort that right now, when I'm sitting down and playing the 15-30 and 30-60 games, it's like, you know what, this works for me. I get this. I feel comfortable, and I understand this. It's nice to know that if I went bankrupt tomorrow, I could still get by and have something that works for me. The thing for me is that I never thought it would go on this long. When I started playing poker, I didn't think I'd be here in 6 years still doing it. And so when I made all that money and had the opportunity to walk away, great. But it's not like I planned to play poker for my entire life. And if I could, that would be cool. But at no point am I willing to make a huge investment with my time. So unfortunately right now I'm really tied down by all the stuff that's going on. So what I'm doing is I'm registering for school next year. Not sure if I'll go. Not sure even if I want to go. And in the meantime, I'm going to try and get this stuff as substantially resolved as I can. Keep running money off poker, see how that goes. And as far as the bankruptcy stuff, at this point, things are in a position where that's not a serious threat. But at one point, it was a concern. And hopefully that won't come up. And as far as what the future holds 2 years from now, fuck if I know. The plan right now is to keep doing what I can with this stuff. I've got this novel that I really love. I'm really pleased with. I'm co-authoring it with a good friend of mine. Going to get that finished. Hopefully that'll be, we've drafted the whole thing. Now we're just polishing it up. That'll be done before the school year next year in any case. So I'll have that under my belt. That's something that I do love to do. And, in the meantime, it's not like things are that bad. I'm in a fantastic relationship right now. I've got great friends. It's, the job that I'm working right now is not that harsh. It's stressful, but that's a choice, right? I can either, make myself stressed about that or I cannot. So, sitting down and playing 3 or 4 hours of poker a day and then answering emails and telling lawyers what to do and yelling at them is, I've done worse. So that's the plan as it is, and we'll take it from here.
Cool, man. Well, listen, thanks for coming on the show. We appreciate it. Obviously, best of luck. I mean, your story's pretty fascinating. I mean, you've literally been on top of the poker world. Now you're sort of, sort of going through a transition. So it's fascinating to hear about. If people want to sort of follow your poker journey, and you even talk about a lot of your business stuff, your video blog on Card Runners, and it seems like you're updating it all the time now. So check that out there if people are interested.
Yeah, absolutely. That's, to be honest, that's one of the things that going through poker is one of the things I realized about myself is that I would really love to be in some sort of position where it's my job to relate to people, because I love that. And so blogging and going through that has been something that has always not only been very rewarding for me, but something that I find has given me a lot of growth as well. So I do not only love to do that, but if you want to communicate with me on the forums and you ask me questions and stuff like that, I'm more than happy to answer and just talk about that stuff.
Well, listen, it's been awesome talking to you. Really appreciate it. Good luck the rest of the way, and we'll get an update at some point.
Thanks. All right. Take care, guys.
Thank you.